And then it was the cable. It was just the cable. I
And
was
we are
freaking out with my
live.
provider.
Mario just woke up. Puya
They're like,
has
did
no
you plug
internet.
it in, sir?
We streamed to the wrong event entirely on YouTube. Sorry, everybody, but welcome back. Can I get a quick audio video check from those of you in chat? I see Cody's already laughing at us. Not a problem. Welcome, everybody. It is the third Wednesday of the month. That means it's time for the Kubernetes office hours. That's where we get on the internet here on YouTube. We stream live for about an hour today with our esteemed panel of Kubernetes experts. And then we will answer your questions as best that we can and get you going. But before we do that, why don't we introduce ourselves? Let's go. Jeff, Marky, Pierre, Pop, Puya, Mario, and Dave Strebel's here. All right, let's get it started.
Hello. My name is Jeffrey Sika. I'm a CNCF ambassador. I work at Red Hat. I do lots of crazy Kubernetes things all around the community. And I'm also known for running the Honk CTL challenge. But I am by no means a security expert. I just play one on TV.
I am Marky Jackson. I do lots around the community. I am super thrilled to be here. It is very early, and I'm sorry I look like hell.
Hey, I'm Pierre. I'm contributing to this Kubernetes project here, as well as working at Spectrum, owning the Kubernetes infrastructure and our software architecture there.
I'm Dan Pop. I'm the field CTO with Sysdig. I also have a little show called the Popcast with Dan Pop, and I'm here just for laughs and to make balloon animals.
Hi, I'm Puya. I'm VP Product with Giant Swarm, and I'm here just because it's the funnest group in the Kubernetes community.
Attaboy, Puya.
Look at that.
Very nice. I am Mario Loria. I currently work in downtown Detroit, although I don't travel there anymore, for a company called StockX. I do Kubernetes there, taking us kind of from 0 to 60, if you will, and doing everything from auto scaling, ingress controllers, service mesh, all that fun stuff. So look forward to some great questions today.
Yeah, I'm Dave Strabel. I work at Microsoft on the Azure Global Black Belt team as a cloud native architect, focused around Kubernetes and really anything in the Kubernetes ecosystem.
Dave's lighting is fantastic.
What is a black belt team? I have to know. And also I have to fix my audio.
It's just a fancy name for a team that has a very narrow focus in Azure. But it sounds really cool.
That does
My
sound
kids
very
think
cool.
it's pretty cool. So,
But can we, George, mind if I take over a little bit? The lighting, dude. Dave, you're on. Everybody who's watching this, like this guy, you're on lock, man. You got it. It's amazing. Sorry, got sidebar.
Dave is the only person who didn't just roll out of bed. You can totally
actually, I did.
All right. We will go through the intro here, and then I'm going to try to fix my audio. I guess I'm coming out in mono for some reason. I don't know. I got to figure it out. So before we start, let's do the ground rules. First of all, if you're in chat, say hello. Let us know where you're listening in the world. We love to hear where you're coming from. And that's always fun. So this is a Kubernetes event, so the code of conduct is in effect, so please be excellent to each other. This is also a judgment-free zone. Everyone had to start from somewhere, so please help your buddy out by having a supportive environment in the channel and during the show. We like to have a good time. We will do our best to answer your questions, but the panel doesn't have access to your cluster, so live debugging is off topic. Like we can't SSH into your host and fix your stuff, but we will try to do our best to figure out what your problem is so we can at least get you moving to the next step. And that might be looking into a certain log or something like that. Panelists, you're encouraged to expand on your answers with your experience and pro tips. After all, that's why we have you on your panel, have you on the panel so that we can share your war stories and all the things that you've done, especially in production. Audience, you can help us by pasting in URLs to the official docs, blogs, or anything that might be relevant to the topic at hand. Every single time we've done a show and we're talking a topic, someone whacks a link into the chat for a new tool that none of us have heard of. And that's awesome. That's part of the reason we do the show, so we can all learn together. So the panelists, everyone is learning something. So if you have the expertise, by all means, give us your expertise in chat. And who knows, you might be
Whack
able
that link and subscribe button. Whack that link.
Whack that link and subscribe button. And if you do too good a job in chat, you might end up on the show like Pierre or someone. So all the panels that you see here are volunteers. So this is open for the community. If you want to get on, just ping me. And that's literally how a bunch of you got started here. Post your questions directly into chat, and then we'll put those in a little document that I'll read out. Or you can just post your questions. If you have a question already on discuss.kubernetes.io or Stack Overflow, just paste it in and we'll read it, and then we'll get to it. If we read a question and we need more information for you, we might ask you for that information, go do another question, and then come back to you. So please be patient when that happens. You can also help us out by tweeting, spreading the word, and paying it forward, and all that kind of good social media stuff that says, hey, I really enjoyed office hours, and it makes us feel good because the show is going on over 3 years now or something crazy like that. I was supposed to look up how long we were going. Before we start, I do want to thank the following companies for supporting the community with their developer volunteers: Giant Swarm, StockX, VMware, Red Hat, Utility Warehouse, Spectrum, and Sysdig. And special thanks, as always, to the CNCF for sponsoring our t-shirt giveaway. If we ask your question on the air, we will automatically enter you in a little raffle, and we will probably give you a t-shirt away. Hello, Artemis from the Netherlands. I see FC, hello from Italy. Who else is here? Pop is here.
Ciao, Italia.
Cody's here. Siam, welcome. Allison is here from the UK. Just recently moved to the UK from New Zealand. Dope. Welcome, Weaveworks. All right, let's get started. I'm going to ask the first question, and then I'm going to fix my audio, and then you all talk amongst yourselves. All right, the first question comes from Clap. Welcome to the show, which is a link to the forums. So let me look at that. And the question is, YAML config for multi-arch support. I need to configure a YAML to run a container in Kubernetes with the parameters below. And then I'll go ahead and whack that text there. Basically, docker run -rm -privilege multi-arch /kimi user static reset -ps. Try different steps but not able to work. This should work alongside the Jenkins plugin, which the entry command is cat like this, and then part of the YAML command -cat. Can you all see the question there? I pasted it in. I don't want to read the raw stuff out to you. And they are on 1.16.8. Anyone have any ideas on this one?
I have a question. And Clap, are you more trying to figure out how to templatize this in the Jenkins plugin that you're saying, the Kubernetes plugin? If you could just clarify that for me.
Yeah, because we don't have multi-arch support in PodSpec, do we?
Not in Kubernetes, but in the Kubernetes Jenkins plugin, we do have that in the pod template. That's why I just wanted to double check.
Right.
So the way a lot of people are approaching multi-arch these days are just publishing a, I already forgot, it's the V2 spec of a container image that has all the different pointers towards different image types based on the architecture. So in that sense, doing it well, you don't actually need to target a specific architecture. That said, the other thing that you would be doing, I'm just kind of elaborating, is actually targeting the different node types with your pod spec.
Yeah, so Clap is saying, just trying to rock this in the Jenkins pipeline, indeed. Another question to you, Clap, are you using the Jenkins Kubernetes plugin? If you are not, you definitely should be using that, because then you will be able to use this by using the template, the pod template configuration. And if you'd like, we can take this offline and you can share with me what your pod template spec looks like for the Jenkins plugin. I actually wrote the maintainer of that plugin, so I can definitely help you with that.
All right, Clap says, yeah, that's what I'm using. Am I still coming out on only one channel? I don't think I'm going to be able to fix that.
No, you're fixed. I just checked on the stream.
Oh, all right. All right.
Oh, hold on. You are coming through one.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I don't know why that is,
All
but we'll fight through it while we go. Okay. Anything else for Clap? All right. Thanks for your question. And if you have more, feel free to ask again. Next question comes from FC. Hi from Italy. We have just started a process of migrating our production clusters from GKE to EKS, and we are really just at the investigation step. Anyone who's already done this, is there any pitfall you hit that you might think might be useful for us to know? And panel, just in general, moving from one managed service to the other, do you have any tips? Because I'm sure some of these tips apply to all clouds.
I've seen this in multiple customers doing this. So like one of the things I would say here is, with GKE, you have like an underlying OS difference, right? With like, the the cause versus like, Ubuntu and those types of things. So that's the first thing to say there. I think also just the deployment mechanisms, right, are different. There's the you can use things like EKS ETL and stuff like that on the Amazon side to help kind of, benefit or deploy functions that way. If there's underlying services that you're tapping, obviously, like if you were going to like use functions from Spanner outside your cluster, that type of thing, think about that. But the main pitfall I've seen is not, just doing the underlying plumbing. How are we going to deploy this? It's different from this. How are we going to deploy our applications? And it still is the same kind of underlying API that you're hitting from the Kubernetes side, but it's the underlying infrastructure is obviously, there's little different choices or subtle choices between the two, and getting used to like CloudFormation and all that fun stuff versus maybe using Terraform.
Yeah, adding to that, I think you'll have a bit of a CNI difference or also other configuration difference. Most of that shouldn't have a big impact, but you need to basically test the hell out of that. It's trying out a lot of things and seeing where they break, because even slight different configurations can, with certain workloads, just lead to unexpected. I think especially with CNI, I think EKS still doesn't do Calico, and a lot of people run Calico. I'm not sure what the CNI is currently on GKE as default.
Yep. And also different differences of like versions, right? You can get, I think they're like, they lag on the Amazon side. And again, I'm not, we're not supporting or denying any of these. We're saying any good choice is good there. But there's that, and then obviously the differences on the underlying nodes in terms of the OS. That's something to think about, right? Amazon Linux versus like the things I mentioned earlier.
Yeah, and just because I live in EKS and breathe it too often, EKS ETL actually abstracts a lot of that CloudFormation and other configuration away, so that won't be too tedious. What I found is a lot of the core pieces that are kind of critical to things operating nicely are tick boxes in GKE, where they are things you have to manually consider and install it, whether with Helm or outside of that. So an example of this is the cluster autoscaler. I believe that's just a tick box in GKE. In Amazon, you have to set up the Helm chart and configure all those values yourself. Another one is node local DNS, which is something you'll want to seriously consider for scalability concerns, depending how big your cluster is. Again, that's something that is a tick box in GKE, but you have to manage yourself and handle in EKS. So knowing those things going in, knowing the overhead to get to a stability state and measuring baselines might be helpful depending on your application applications and things that you're running for your overall platform.
I think the way that I would approach it is look at what you have in GKE and EKS. This is kind of what they've been saying, but look at that, get the as similar of possible an environment in EKS, and then like without your application, then try to move your application, find the pitfalls, and then you're going to have to figure out some sort of transition step, whether that's like DNS failover or what, once you get to that point. But it's like, make sure you have a sane environment, make sure the app works, then migrate the data, and then do a DNS switch or something.
Yeah, and also just to harp, the networking, this goes for really any moving from cloud environment to cloud environment, but the different networking models can really hold you up and kind of can put you in a bad place if you don't think through how the networking actually works differently between GCP and AWS. I see that tons of times when people try to move environments. is the networking will hold them up of how they actually do networking, because every networking model is different in every cloud environment. So I'd really focus on that, initially to make sure you kind of understand the differences.
Nailed it. What a panel.
Anything
what a
else?
bunch of superstars. Bam. Next.
Okay. All right, moving on. We have Artemis. This is a very interesting question. How am I sounding now? I think I'm still left channel only. I hate computers.
Sound good to me.
I hate computers so much, Pop. Artemis asks, I have a question since we are creating a new Kubernetes infrastructure. Congratulations. And we're struggling to choose the right size of machines. We have 3 HA masters plus 4 workers. How do you all figure out what machine size? Especially interested in your control plane.
Oh, can I get the first salvo at this? You mind, everyone?
Sure, take it away.
So I've seen where, like, customers and or just people using Kubernetes in general don't understand the profile of their applications before they move it into said thing. It's like, oh, I'm just going to take it and move it over, and it's just going to, it's going to work, and it's not going to use resources. Well, guess what? One, look at ensuring you understand the profile of the memory and the CPU profile of your application. So to use things like Prometheus, use other tools or whatever, right? And there's things in Kubernetes natively, right? You have the ability to kind of limit and do quotas, right? So look at like throttling, right? So be able to understand like, hey, this is using 4 cores, or 2 cores, but maybe at peak time it's using half a core. So why the hell am I allocating, 3, this many workers, those type of things. So being able to profile your application before you throw it into the cluster, to me, it will pay dividends. And then you can look at it and go, and then you use some type of tool. I'm not going to advocate one, but there's plenty out there that you can then say, okay, my amount of, of resource utilization is getting lower or higher. And maybe I don't need to use the 2x large, or, the 4 core machine. Maybe I need to use the 8 core machine. So it goes conversely, like maybe I need more resources. So be cognizant of your application profile. To me is your and service profile is my advice there.
Yeah, for the masters, there is recommendations, I think, in the official docs. Usually they scale slightly with how many workers you have. But if you're like below 10 workers, like suggested here, it's most of the time the small size. Still think about if you have other things scheduled to the masters. Some people schedule additional add-ons to masters, and some add-ons by default get into masters. So you might need a bit more. 4 workers, I would say that's the minimum you should go. I would go usually with smaller workers, but more of them. So you get a bit more of a failover when one of the workers is down. You don't have 1/4 of your resources down, because I would always, at least for production or even for development, because if dev is down, your devs won't work. And be blocked. So usually try to have at least 1 worker as a free buffer in general, because in nowadays world, you should always think about, okay, when I want to upgrade, 1 worker will be maybe down. When I have an issue, maybe I get a worker into failure mode, and then I want to be stable.
Another thing that you may want to consider is this idea of you have worker nodes, but also having infra nodes, which are separate from worker and control plane nodes. If you're running your own Prometheus, or you're running other services that your application may depend on, keeping those workloads separate and on machine types that are more tuned to what those services need to run on. Because like if you're running an Elk stack and Prometheus, those may need more resources than your application, and you may want to have fewer but dedicated nodes for that.
Hey, Jeff, would you say that that's more towards like a tiered level architecture where you're separating based off the application tier? So for example, an Elk stack would be in a different tier.
Yes. I haven't really thought of it as tiered. It really is to me like this logical separation of my application runs on this node pool, and the services my application may require for monitoring or just dependencies runs on a separate node pool. So I guess you could consider it tiered.
Yeah, there's like a logical separation, like this is my data layer, so that's a different tier and that'll be here. At least that's how I've done it in the past at other companies.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you can also, I mean, depending on your budget and how you want to architect it, you could do this with different node pools in a single control plane. You could also spin up a totally different cluster that is just meant to support your application and, have multiple clusters feeding data into it. It all kind of depends on your situation, but these are just kind of common patterns that we see.
Yep, I agree.
Anyone else have an opinion on this one? Just out of curiosity, how many of you always have your control plane not do worker stuff? Do you keep that separated, or is that like a home lab thing? I'm assuming everyone keeps it all separated, right?
Me personally, yes.
Maybe with the exception of management workloads, like core plugins, stuff that should be there even if workers are not there.
Yeah, and part 2, what about your etcd? Do you keep those on there too, or are there any configurations where you like to run those as a separate? I'm assuming at the high end, right? You're going to want all that stuff separate. Anyone have any insight or tips on that?
Ideally, I'd like to have etcd separate, just for the life cycle difference too.
Okay.
You don't always upgrade etcd when you upgrade Kubernetes, for example, or you change control plane components. However, it is additional operational overhead usually, and it is also additional resources in terms of machines if you manage them yourself.
Right.
I think most of the big providers have some kind of abstraction. Not sure, is Azure still using their managed DB for that? I think Google is using a managed DB with an etcd front end.
But I think
I've seen large customers pretty much, I mean, talking like, big scale customers basically like, have it be completely segregated, but then the smaller ones are, not really smaller, even medium size, are just taking the usual, like the defaults that, because honestly, etcd is amazing. Obviously, it's the brains of the operation. To me, it's just like they want to be able to manage everything kind of centrally instead of having to worry about, okay, there's my API, and there's my proxy, there's the you know what I mean? It's like, okay, I can have it all concatenated into these 3 boxes. I'm getting AJ for those 3. I'm getting 3 for the price of 1, right?
So. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure we address that because, I kind of get used to the, hey, I have a NUC or a Raspberry Pi thing and I'm trying to cram as much stuff onto a node as possible. So
right.
I think what it also comes down to, and we've seen this in the last year and a half, is the idea of, treating your VMs as cattle. Now we're going to treating clusters as cattle. So, I mean, having everything run on a single cluster, but having, several smaller clusters that can kind of load balance and deal with fault tolerance between them. There's, especially for small and medium companies, there's not necessarily a benefit to having a totally separate CD cluster. It's just so much simpler to be like, all right, cluster A is down. Everything's now load balanced to cluster B. It's just simpler, and you don't need to have crazy domain knowledge of that CD.
Mm-hmm. What do they call that? Smaller blast radius, I believe. Pierre, you have an opinion? All right. Anybody else have an opinion on sizing and machine size and where you're running stuff?
Oh, I checked the article from Learn Kubernetes IO. There's a very good article that basically explains the do's and don'ts and why you should use smaller instances, for example, as well.
Oh, interesting.
And
okay.
Very nice written text, and the graphics on that page are always very, very nice. There's a couple of these articles there, and yeah.
Yep. Sorry about that. The scroll in the chat was busted on the stream. It should be all cut up to date. And as always, we'll grab all of these URLs and whack them in the show notes after the show. So, all right, moving on. Here comes the Windows question. Victor, welcome to the show, says, what are the plans for mixed Linux and Windows clusters? Is it planned to unify standards for that? Interesting question. Because going by what Jeff said, I think in my brain, if you're a mixed shop, would you want this, or would you want Windows workloads on one cluster and Linux workloads on the other cluster? And I have no idea what the mixed.
I've looked into this a little bit,
Okay.
just for research. I've never done it. What is usually hard is the networking. I think by now there is some CNIs that do support both. And I do think that on Azure it also works, especially when you use things like virtual kubelet or something. Still, you need to see, like, sometimes the separate cluster is just easier to manage. I know, Dave, do you have any experience with that, maybe?
I love everybody thinks the Microsoft
I
game
know.
would, but
It's
I
great.
have very little.
You're black belt, man. Come
I
on.
know. That's the one thing I'm not a black belt in. Yeah, I like to keep them separate, honestly. There's just a lot of differences between how the Windows OS and Linux OS works, especially from a networking stack and everything. So yeah, it totally does work and is supported, but I don't know, from a comfort level and just much more straightforward. And you tend to have different teams that are managing Linux workloads versus Windows workloads in large enterprises. That's also something to consider.
So from a separation of concern standpoint, I guess.
Yeah.
Sayim wants to say that you can run this using Rancher RKE, by the way. Flannel supports, I believe. And then they got a link to the issue there from the Rancher folks.
I am coming in the clutch.
I'm clicking into that.
Shout out.
This question brought to you by Microsoft Edge on Linux. All right, let's see. I'm just looking to see what Rancher's got going on here. Oh, I see. Okay, so they have the control plane on Linux, node 2 on Linux, and then there's which is a worker node, and then a third worker node just for Windows containers. So
yeah, control planes I think only work on Linux, right?
Right.
Yeah, typically, well, your control plane has to be on Linux. Then you'll have different node pools dedicated for each your Linux workloads and your Windows workloads for the other node pool.
Right. All right, Victor, we hope that gets you started. Moving on, Steve Yackey, welcome to the show, asks, if you notice a node has moved into not ready state for a while and the kubelet has stopped responding via describing the node, what would be your first troubleshooting steps to investigate? Had this happen recently, ended up terminating the node, but was curious about best practices for troubleshooting this. Great question.
I would first ask, before you troubleshoot, I would ask what version your cluster is on. I have seen some people that are on a 1.10 cluster that run into this exact same problem. So that would be the first thing I would check.
Do you have SSH access to the node? And does it matter? Because, like, does it make more sense for you to SSH into the node and start looking at kubelet logs? Or does it make more sense, and can your application tolerate kubectl deleting the node? Or, like, removing it from the machine set and then letting everything just reconcile? It really comes down to, how hands-on do you want to be and how automated are you?
Okay, Jeff. So let me throw that back at you then.
Please.
When do you determine whether it's worth investigating, or is it just one of those, a node died, it's Kubernetes, whatever?
Okay, so
like if it happens like once, then
exactly. No, exactly. If it happens once and your cluster and application can tolerate that, yeah, just delete it and then let it reconcile and it should come back. If you see it happen in the next hour, something's probably up. You should dig into it more. If it happens in the next week, something's probably up. You should dig into it more.
Right.
But I mean, if it's the first time ever doing it and you can tolerate it, I mean, what's your P0 for the moment? Is something like broken in the application and you need to get it up immediately? Again, it depends on first step.
So Steve mentions they're running 1.17. Let's assume they do have SSH access. Let's just keep going. I want to go through your troubleshooting steps in your brain as
my troubleshooting steps would be SSH onto the node and then see if kubelet's running. If kubelet is or isn't running, then I would look at kubelet logs. It could be as simple as if you reboot the node, does it come back? But then you're still going to have a question of, okay, so why did it still enter this state? And then you get back to, okay, rebooting the node may have fixed it. Does it happen again in the next hour, in the next week? Like, but yeah, first step for me would be SSH onto the node, look at kubelet logs, see if like something's there.
Pierre's nodding.
I'd also check out the metrics. Like oftentimes this happens if you get an overloaded node. So you might be running workloads that are not restricted enough, or they're not adhering to the limits, or the limits are too high. You might not have C group slices set up on your node, depending on who is managing that. And still, there is so many cases where a node can get overloaded, and even in some cases, you will not be able to even SSH to the node anymore. So have some observability set up, at least have some metrics to be able to see what happened right before it went not ready.
Can the kernel kill the kubelet? Like if you don't set any limits or anything and you just let it rip?
I think it can.
Okay, I was just curious.
I know a tool that can help you there, but I won't speak about it.
Okay. We mentioned Sysdig log, so just stick the link in, slap Sysdig on there and run it.
I didn't say it. I did not say that, George. Yeah. I did not say that word.
Hey, as long as it's open source, we can mention all the tools we want.
You're right.
So
you're right.
It's fine.
Exactly.
We do mention, debugging tools all the time. So just check it out. Someone who is not Pop will drop a link to the Sysdig tool into the chat.
This tool.
Okay, so Pop, obviously, let's just address this here. When you're running your clusters, I assume you already have all the Sysdig stuff going in there. And
I have. So I'm using like Prometheus and stuff I have back here, right? And stuff that normally I'll use that stuff. But yeah, I'm using our commercial tool, but I also use our captures tool to be able to see like something like, okay, I'm running an Atom Emery. What was the actual system call that caused it to happen, right? So those are the things that I typically run. I'm even running. Look, I'll throw some props to the Kinfolk people. I'm using something called Inspector Gadget. Phenomenal tool.
Ooh, get us a link to that. Is that a Kinfolk tool?
Yep. Kinfolk, right? Is that how you pronounce it? Did I do that right?
Yes, it
Kinfolk.
is.
Kinfolk.
Also a Berlin company, as far as I know, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, Inspector Gadget with a K.
With
there
K.
it is.
Yeah.
K, exactly.
Of course it is.
It's a BPF analysis tool, basically.
Ooh. I had not even heard of this, and I'm like Kinfolk fan number one.
Somewhere Bob is like tuning in immediately. He hears
yeah.
I actually started to dig into eBPF a lot recently. Very cool tool set.
Ooh, so Sayem, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, is linking to Node Problem Detector. Interesting.
What people are using Node Problem Detector often for also is to set up a health check which automatically restarts the node, because like it oftentimes brings up exactly those issues that you won't be fixing. So
is that kind of just like, I don't know, that feels like you're kind of just over band-aiding at that point. You're like, well, YOLO Kubernetes, just restart the node over and over again without finding the root cause. Not that we recommend that. Yeah. That's how my home.
To be the Docker socket dance where you would like just restart the Docker sockets.
Does SIG node own this?
Yeah, it's in the Kubernetes namespace.
That's why I'm like,
yeah.
does SIG node own this?
Let's see who's an owners here.
I think it runs by default on GKE, if I remember.
Yeah, and those are the SIG-node people. Interesting.
And they use it for the node auto repair stuff that they have.
Okay.
Which is basically restarting nodes, I think.
All right, so there's some recommendations and a bunch of tools. Steve, I hope that helps you out. If you have a follow-up, please feel free to ask. And welcome to the show, Steve. Moving on, Andre. Hi from Tokyo. Okay, this was going to be complicated. So far, we end up with the answer, no reason for allocatable, to my next question. So they have a link. This is the question here. Okay, here we go. Hi. Welcome, Andre. Does scheduler take into account eviction thresholds before schedule pods in case of allocatable is not enforced? I have soft eviction of 2 gigs of memory and hard to 1 gigabyte. Is that what that means? However, mem incapacity of my node still is the same as free reports to me. Does it mean the scheduler blindly follows mem for capacity and then does an eviction? Did that question make sense to anybody? The way I read it. Sorry, I'm trying to parse this. 1 second.
It's quite a complicated interaction between the various settings that you have for capacity and allocation and eviction. If I remember correctly, eviction is not included in scheduling at all. It's enforced on a per node or per machine level. So it's actually when stuff gets evicted and not how much capacity or how much you give it. But you can set the allocatable on the kubelet, I think.
Yeah,
but
and
you have to create C group slices for it, otherwise it won't work.
Yep. So then they ask, what might be the reason to use QoS C groups and an option named -S C groups per -QoS for enforcing allocatable? I would think that's the only way to do it, isn't it?
Yeah, I do think without C group slices, you won't be able to enforce the reservations.
Yeah, because that's done at the kernel level. So yeah, I mean, there's, I don't think there's a way around that as of now.
Yeah, I see Andre typing, so let's give them a chance, because sorry for my stubbornness, since I've already communicated enough with David Ashpole, who seems to be an expert in it. Maybe I can find more details out of it. Andre says the main part is about QoS C groups.
Yeah, I'm not too familiar. I'm obviously familiar with C groups. I'm not familiar with QoS C groups that much. But I mean, if you're talking to David Ashpole, I mean, that's probably the person.
Yeah, you would be the first person I have.
If you stumped him, you're gonna stump this panel pretty damn easily. Sorry, not to oversell this amazing panel, but
anybody else have opinions here? Is Mario hiding in the back?
What? No,
there you are.
I'm right here. What do you want from me, George? Why are you always on my case?
I love how you're looking up. That's the best part.
I just want to make sure that everyone is getting the proper airtime.
So I did want to say his first question there, does scheduler take into account eviction threshold before scheduling pods in case of allocator? No, I don't think it cares about the eviction threshold. I think what Pooja said stands. Like, scheduling and eviction are two separate pieces here, right? The scheduler is the scheduler. It's going to schedule the workload. Eviction is kind of node specific. Kubelets making those decisions. The next part is he said something about, does it blindly follow memory from capacity and then do eviction? I think this bleeds into allocatable, right? I think that's what the scheduler is looking at when it makes a decision, is allocatable for when to place a workload. I don't know if the total capacity flows into anything. And yeah, like we've already mentioned, C groups are, and this is actually easier on the cloud providers. You can tune this kubelet settings like any EKS-ETL. You can pass them relatively easily and define eviction thresholds and allocatable for your nodes. So,
and for the QoS, like, at least if it's similar to the QoS that has been around for a while, you don't really need QoS to do your limiting and prioritization. That is mainly, as far as I remember, for if you want Kubernetes to do automatic QoS for you. If you set priority groups or priority classes, for example, and do the limiting and the capacity yourself, then you don't need the QoS that is inbuilt. It might even give you less features, because with priority classes, for example, you would be able to create more classes than just based on limits being there or requests being there. You might not want to set always limits, for example, for memory or CPU, because you don't want it to be killed, but you still want something to be high priority. Like, I don't know, networking plugin, ingress controller.
Okay, I see people typing. Yeah, I guess I'm just trying to understand why the QoS C groups are needed at all. We could do limiting with without QoS. Any other comments on this? And it looks like Jan McFly wants to recommend a talk. Let's see if this is related to what we're talking about here. In the meantime, Chris Carty joins us. Say hello, Chris. Your little
Chris.
intro. You're muted.
Trying to find the unmute button. I forgot how Zoom worked. Hi, everybody. My name's Chris. I'm a customer engineer with Google Cloud Canada, the public sector division. I'm here because I love Kubernetes, love learning, and love helping everybody. So
awesome.
This QoS one is a bit of a pickle. I've not had a chance to chew on before.
Yeah, and Jan McFly is dropping a YouTube video here for understanding and working with C Groups interface with Michael Anderson. Which
I just checked out the QSC groups, and as far as I see, you really don't need them, but you should use kube reserved and system reserved, and then you have basically the rest for workloads, and then prioritization on workloads. I would do this priority classes.
Awesome. Moving on. And by the way, I have no idea why I'm only coming out your left channel or right channel, so apologize for that. Augustin Holgrave, welcome to the show, asks, I'm looking for running a service locally against some services in my Kubernetes cluster for debugging purposes. Port forward seems not to be enough, and I need to hit lots of endpoints within the cluster network. I've seen telepresence could be a solution, but it seems a bloated solution. Have you had a similar issue? How did you tackle it? What was your experience with telepresence? Anyway, we'll give it a shot. So I see someone already typing in the notes. Kube tunnel, is that a thing?
I've played with it, and Siam's, as usual, 100% on point. Fantastic tool.
Give me, what's the GitHub here?
Kube
tunnel proxy?
Yeah.
Stefan Sundin, does that sound right?
Has anybody tried Tilt with this? Tilt Dev?
Tilt's cool.
Yeah.
I know people that
I've
use
used
Tilt
that.
and love it, but I don't
I
have.
use it, and I absolutely love the tool.
So that's Dan Bentley and L's team company. Yeah, I mean, again, great tool. I like I said, I was trying to see the comparisons between the telepresence, but that you just took it to the next level, Marky. That's awesome. Great idea.
That's tilt.dev, isn't it?
Yep.
What is Tilt actually doing? Like, I've not yet understood it completely when I checked it out.
So they're like a dev productivity tool, right? And so like it helps you to like, and Marky, you probably get into the weeds on that one. You want to add more detail there?
Essentially, it'll let you test features or code-related items locally against an actual cluster that may not reside locally. And it does it with such ease, and writing the code to actually do that interfacing it's just super simple. So Dan and Nick and Elle, they've done a phenomenal job.
That ties into Augustin's follow-up. It says, yeah, but K-tunnel is for my cluster to be able to see my service, but I need my local service to reach cluster services.
And that's where Tilt will help. Again, like any changes you make, like you can basically do automatic rebuilds as you edit in your IDE, which is pretty cool. So you got a continuous feedback loop. Yeah, I mean, I'm floored by it. It's a very cool tool. Might be something you look at, Augustine.
Inlets might also work. I think Mario just posted it.
Yep.
And sometimes it's also just use the proxy route of the API server. Run a kubectl proxy and run against that. You can basically access all the services as long as you have the right token.
That's interesting.
So
Alex
very
Ellis,
lightweight solution.
Alex Ellis solution, and all donate to this guy. I mean, look, he's doing all this amazing stuff, and he's doing it for free. I mean, like, come on, seriously, like, get out there, and if you're going to get behind something like this, get behind it.
Yeah,
so
good.
August, you answered it in text. I want you to answer it on voice here. Augustine asks, how crazy is it to run OpenVPN in a cluster? Mario, you have an answer for this one.
I mean, I have history with OpenVPN. Let's just say it's a very heavy solution. It's very traditional. That code has not been reviewed, even though it's an open thing. It's incredibly heavy. And honestly, I wouldn't really classify it as that secure anymore. I really think for something like this, you're going to want something a little more lightweight, a little bit more modern, maintained, etc. And that's where I think inlets or tilts is going to be a lot better. I know this because we actually actively use a solution called Tunnel right now, which is just a fancy Python wrapper with a really crappy UI in front of OpenVPN. It's incredibly heavy to lift. It needs MongoDB for some reason. And so we have to run that completely separate, and then we have to connect to VPCs to make it all work, and it's incredibly tedious. So look for something that is KISS, right? Keeping it really simple, and something you can kind of just deploy in your cluster and then get access to the from your laptop. Not that is going to be more of like an infrastructure bound re-architecture of connecting things together and making sure there's routing and things like that. Like, look for the simpler solution here, because that's really all you need at the end of the day. So, and like I said earlier, like OpenVPN is a great solution. Don't get me wrong. I just think nowadays it's been surpassed by so many better alternatives that are providing more functionality, more usefulness. And Inlets does have if you go to inlets.dev, there is a pro version that you can get support and pay for, like a professional version with more features and control over your data, things like that. And as we've said before, Alex Ellis is a great peer in the Kubernetes community. He's a CNCF ambassador, probably one of the better ones. And he's made some great software. So
you say that as a peer of his.
Well, compared to myself, he is remarkable.
Yeah.
So
but it sounds like kubectl proxy probably might be the first thing to try, just to see if that works, right? And then inlets and/or tilt.
Yep. Sure.
Chris, I see you linked to Cloud Code. Sorry, that's a very ungoogleable product from Google. Why would you call something code? Okay. What's a TLDR?
It's a plugin for VS Code. It works kind of similar. It doesn't have as many fancy things like Tilt does.
Okay.
But it's just from my couple days of playing around with it, it's pretty cool. You can see all your namespaces in the cluster. That's your contacts. Start deploying, and it does some of that. But yeah, Tilt is pretty awesome, especially with the save your build, and then it just kind of reloads and does stuff. Which is awesome.
Cloud Code supports.
I'm going to put my security hat on and say, go back to the OpenVPN thing. Look, I LOL at OpenVPN. I can absolutely hack the shit out of it, and so that's something I will the S out of it. Sorry, I would say to you all, again, it's a great tool. Again, but in terms of you said, the interaction, I think there's more eloquent, as Mario said, keep it simple kind of solutions out there.
Any other comments before we move on? Great question. Lots of tools. Awesome. If audience, if you have any other tools that you want to recommend to Augustin, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, feel free to just drop in a link, and we'll make sure that hits the show notes. All right. 8th question. This is going to be our last one here. If we can, if we'll try to cram in some more. Cloud Grim asks, I am running K3S on Raspberry Pis and would like to do some automated infrastructure tests and chaos engineering. Any recommendations of tools that might accommodate on ARM? So not just chaos tools, but ARM supporting tools.
I said Litmus Chaos.
Litmus Chaos?
And I put the link in there as well in the thing.
Okay.
They have ARM support for some of the actions there. Again, I'm not super familiar with it. Gremlin does something that's more of a commercial tool, right? In terms of case, but I don't know if they have direct ARM support as of yet. But it's very, very cool space. And again, it's Cloud Grim, very bleeding edge, right? You're wanting to do all this really cool stuff. It's definitely, awesome.
I expect, especially with everyone, I see everyone tweeting about those new ARM instances on Amazon. They have a cool name. The ARM support in Kubernetes will, not in Kubernetes itself, but as far as the workloads and containers and stuff, will start to become more popular. All right, so we have Litmus. I know we've discussed chaos tools before on the show.
And KubeMonkey.
Let's see if that one.
I have a question. Is actually anyone running ARM nodes already in production? I've seen a couple of articles, but nothing yet that I heard from friends and stuff.
Well, I think they're doing the Edge conference today. I'm not
Well, let's go find out.
Yeah, they are. So so that's Ranch is putting that on today, and they're doing like more support. I think it's going to be more widespread for like edge use cases, but I have not seen any customers use it in prod at all at this point.
Okay.
In a former life and not related to Kubernetes per se, we had a large donation of ARM hardware that we were trying to purpose as a research cluster.
Right.
And it was bumpy to say the least. Now this was still 2 years ago, but it's hard to get meaningful real workloads on there, even though like we had a whack ton of cores.
Mm-hmm.
It's getting the tooling on there that has been more or less forced into whatchamacallit, Intel AMD 64 architecture.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
You know what's interesting is like I think, and I've read this somewhere. One of our people is looking into like ARM support, and basically I think there's like a multi-arch choice that they've added, like some update that they've done within Docker for you to be able to compile and do your builds in multiple architectures, which I think will help with that, because it's always the same thing. I'm compiling. We're gonna compile for this and this and this. Whereas like having to be able to do that Docker build and these multi-arch help. Like so then you don't have to worry about it. You're like, look, my code's gonna work because I'm just using the various compilers that are gonna build for those various architectures. So I think we'll see that barrier to entry kind of drop. I think in our space.
I think someone linked it above when we were originally talking about multi-arch. It's Docker build X, I think is the command.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's so full circle. See that?
Yeah.
I would also like to say the quote of the day was a whack ton of cores, please.
A whack ton. There it is, Docker build X.
Since we're in Europe, it's the metric equivalent. What is the metric equivalent of a ton? Is that with two N?
Dones.
Dones.
Okay.
Wait, so are you saying if I just have any doc, I could just CD into anything I have, whether it supports ARM or not, and just do Docker build X and it will spit out?
I haven't played with it.
ARM binaries as well?
100% say, but
okay.
Supposedly.
And somebody has been compiling, and it's legit, dude.
Can I do PowerPC? Asking for a friend.
Interesting. So we have 2 questions left. I'm just wondering, are we still doing those? Because I have 2 PSAs that I would like to share with the community.
Yeah. Let's start to wrap it up here. Jeff, if you can you roll a 8-sided die twice for me? And then let's do the PSAs because I do want to get to the Helm thing. You want to take these, Pierre? And then
sure, of course, I can do that. So Helm stable and Helm incubator repositories are shutting down November 13th. At least that's my latest point of knowing. Like that's as far as how that goes.
Mm-hmm.
So if you still deploy Helm shards from these repositories, many of them have been migrated. I will link to the GitHub issue which shows where the repositories have been migrated to, or the shards, in a second in the chat. And then we have the Docker Hub pull limits coming up on November 1st, where unauthenticated users can only do 100 pulls per hour or per day. I'm not even sure anymore.
Right. So one thing I did, I whacked the link to the Helm blog because the last 4 or 5 posts kind of outline their.
Oh, okay, cool.
The timeline of everything, where to find the new charts, deprecation timelines. I am doing this for everyone on every show and on every meeting that I run in the community, and I would appreciate help. Out there somewhere, a version of yourself is running an outdated version of Helm. So let's do our best over the next month or so to just get the word out about the deprecation policies. And I absolutely am totally waiting for our November session for people to ask questions about Helm when this inevitably happens. So
thanks for linking that, George. I was going to just ask really quick, though. I think there was an announcement here in the past few days that GitHub is going to maintain those stable charts being hosted. So people will still be able to pull them if they're deploying or updating. Is that correct?
I have not read that part yet because that was new. All I remember was the deprecation timeline. But let me look here. There's the Artifact Hub. I think that's what we're talking about, right?
I'm not sure. Well, all I know is there was kind of a tweet, and there's a paragraph in this latest 5th birthday where it says they're going to announce the Helm stable and incubator chart repositories will directly be hosted out of GitHub. And GitHub Actions will be powering them, which makes it seem like, and they don't say anything other than that.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering if we know anyone from GitHub that we can ping to verify this as well. But what I'm thinking that means is that that people that are sourcing, and this isn't a Helm 2 versus Helm 3 thing. This is just sourcing those stable or incubator charts.
Yeah.
From the location they have thus far, should continue working past November, because GitHub is hosting them now instead of Google Cloud, which was the previous host.
Right.
Interesting.
All right.
Alternatively, you could do that yourself, basically just setting up GitHub pages on a fork of the repo.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of them have moved to their own. Datadog is one that started their own chart hosting as well. So a lot of those core services.
So the big monolith is getting split up, is what you're saying. And I wish we had time to go into, maybe we should do that in November. Well, it's probably too late by then. Helm 2 to 3 migration strategies. If you're only finding out about this now, you've got homework to do, everyone. So with that, we have winners for the t-shirt contest. That's going to be Steve Yackey and Augustin Holgrave. You've won a Kubernetes t-shirt, which none of us are modeling now for some reason. But it's just the standard. It looks like the shirt that Pop is wearing, except with a Kubernetes logo, and it's pretty dope. We'll just send you to the CNCF store. And as always, a big thanks to the CNCF.
I got one here.
Oh, Augustin has one. Augustin, do you mind if we donate that to someone else then, if you have one? All right, pick someone else. Quick, roll a 1d8 for me. Jeff. But Steve Yackey, you've also won a shirt, and then... What number did you get, Jeff? Jeff still here? Two. FC, are you on the line? You've won a Kubernetes t-shirt. I will follow up with both of you via PM on Slack. And with that, any last words? Thanks to our panel for coming. Another fantastic session. When we quit the stream, hang out and we'll chat for a bit. Those of you listening in, we hope you had a good time. We do this the third Wednesday of every month. We do one session now for the EU, East Coast US. And in 5 hours, we will be doing one for the West Coast US. Thanks, Marky. We did mess up the YouTube URL this morning, so hang out in the channel. You're always welcome to hang out in the channel. If you want to come on the panel, come hang out with us. That's always a pleasure. Thanks, everybody. I will be pinging you for the t-shirts. And with that, panel, any last words? Pop, I know you have to have the last word. I could just tell.
Hey, if you haven't smashed the like and subscribe button for Kubernetes, you should be doing that right now, okay? And whack that. Whack it. And pop it.
All right. With that, good luck, everyone. Remember, no upgrades on Fridays. See ya, everyone, next month. Panel, stick around.